Dear Mr. Barua, today's keynote speaker, Mr. Maulik Jasubai, the chairman of Chemtech Foundation, and the speakers of the sessions following this inaugural session, and the vast number of delegates who have registered themselves to this conference and who have logged in. I'm told that there are about 230 delegates who logged in. And I'm happy that despite the disadvantage is imposed upon us by the pandemic, Chemtech Foundation has shown the resilience and have organized this conference, though virtually, rather than physically. We would have preferred to have this conference held physically, but as Mr. Maulik Shah said, hopefully next year we will have the conference held physically. Just setting the stage for today's conference, as all of you know that very aptly we have the Central Advisory Board has met on several occasions during this pandemic period and put together a series of keynote speeches by eminent speakers and session topics to be presented by several speakers from the industry. And then we also have a few panel sessions chalked out where eminent panelists are going to give their opinion, particularly on the industry sector, which is affected by the pandemic. And aptly, the theme of the conference is building sustainable resilience in the EPC sector and prepare ourselves to future growth. Coming back to this pandemic issue, we are all transitioning from a world almost known to a seemingly unknown world as a result of this pandemic. And it's important that all of us prepare ourselves to transform to face the new world order. Sooner the better. So the thing about this pandemic is it's a kind of a disaster that we have faced and is very different from other disasters we were used to seeing. It's quite regularly things like earthquake, flood, fire, such as those things. But the difference is they were all pretty much localized and short-lived. The impact was not felt all over the world. And this one is quite different from the fact that it is not only hit the social fabric, it is hit actually it has posed a threat to the humanity itself. It's actually hit the basic factor, health. And it's just not restricted to the social fabric or the economic fabric or a business fabric, but it's more serious than that. And it has also hit equally the rich and poor, big companies, large companies, medium-scale companies, small companies, or rich country, poor country, countries such as ours, developing country, developed countries. The pandemic has hit all of them. As a result, the effect is seen everywhere. Just going to what happened, the events emanating from the pandemic, if you see, initially when it hit, we all felt the shock. People were in a mood of shock and surprise, and that they didn't know what hit them. And as the time elapsed, they moved on to a denial mode. Some people are still in the denial mode. As the ex-president of U.S., I don't believe that he's changed his mind. So in that denial mode, people just were looking for evidence. Oh, it cannot happen. How can it happen? No, it's impossible, kind of thing. And then as the time elapsed, they saw it is lingering on. Then the people moved on to the frustration mode. At the frustration mode is they didn't know what to do, and it was lingering on, and the anger was setting in. And that is when people started realizing that it is not a simple thing, it's quite serious. And as the time elapsed, people moved into the depression mode. They saw the job loss, the livelihood was affected, and all of this happened. People went into the depression, and this is when. And if we had lingered on, probably it would have been much more disastrous. But there were companies who then showed the resilience, and as a part of that resilience, they first moved into the decision process, and just to understand the problem. What could it be? And then they moved on to the experimental stage. So how do we tackle this problem? And then to the integration mode. So how do we live with this problem? The resilient people actually went through the shock, the surprise, the denial, frustration, and depression, maybe very quick, or some of those stages they bypassed. And that was a sign of their resilience. And what is resilience, after all? Resilience is the ability to bounce back when things do not go as planned. And I would say, because I'm very specifically making a reference to resilience, the reason is the subject is centered around building a sustainable resilience. And that's why. The three primary factors that I would say a resilient company or the person would have is: one is challenge, second is commitment, and third is the control. Why I said challenge? The resilient people always consider the adversity as a challenge. Adversity has to be won over. It cannot become a paralyzing factor. So that's the first characteristic of resilient people. The second is the commitment. You need to set a goal, and you have to commit yourself to work towards achieving the goal. Third is a control. You spend time and effort on the items and things on which you have control. And when you exercise your control or effort and time on the things on which you have control, you become empowered, and you become confident, and you become resilient, and you'll be able to take the right decision. You'll be able to overcome the adverse situation. And on the other hand, the people who spend a lot of time on things on which they do not have control, and they feel lost, they become powerless. They would have they would have lack of confidence, and so they just don't know what to do, and they don't get the results. So this is essentially the important factor which one has to recognize and realize. When we were talking about our own company, uh, when the pandemic hit, the first thing was, we saw disruption on the supply chain side. One biggest challenge, because our sub-suppliers and ancillary industries, they all shut down. The packaging material supplier shut down, and all these companies were located in Silvassa area, so we were really badly affected. And there was, shutting down the refinery or petrochemicals units was not an option situation. So it was a question of survival more than growth or anything. It's just number one. Number two, the challenge was we had in our site, particularly taking just one example of Jamnagar, we had about 25,000 workmen, either our own people or contractors' people, regular maintenance, shutdown jobs, and construction jobs. So there was a risk of the pandemic spreading over, and people's health getting affected. And so there was a big threat. So these are the big two challenges which we had to take control of, and we did very quickly. And so naturally, fortunately, our industry fell under the Essential Goods and Services Act, and we took it up with the government of India, took some special permission for our ancillary industries to open up and commence production with minimum staff and minimum capacity, and we managed. And we had another problem, challenge, was we had the material, however small quantities, whatever was the cost, but there was the transportation was affected. We didn't have the drivers to run the trucks because all these drivers were migrant laborers, and the highways were all shut down, so they didn't know how to manage the transportation. So these are the challenges, but somehow we took some special actions and incentivized the people, incentivized those workmen as well as the drivers, etc. So we kept our supply chain running with great difficulty. It was the same problem with material coming from abroad, import material. There was ships were not available, and the staff and people abroad, the vendors people, the supply chain side, the customs clearance, the local transport in foreign countries, they were all a challenge. And somehow we managed, but at a cost. That was one part. But then I do not consider these actions as actions which would result in a sustainable resilience to your operations. Quite different. It was a question of survival then. And on the site, we had to actually isolate the people. We had to create quarantine. We had to create islands of people so that there is no intermingling. And we had to introduce all the norms like, masking, sanitizers, use social distance, and all of that is fine. But how do we convert that into a sustainable thing is something which is important, because this is where I would actually cite one of the surveys conducted by the consulting companies, which revealed that the companies who had already implemented the digitalization in those companies, they could actually tackle the effects of the pandemic more effectively, and they could adapt themselves more easily and quickly. And their people were actually reskilled to the new, the new digital world, I would say. So that was one revealing factor. And the second revealing factor was the companies which were in the middle of digitalization, initial phases, and these things were going at some companies very slow pace. I have found that during this COVID period, the last 1 year, the pace of implementation of that digitalization were much, much faster. And they actually estimated about 5 to 10 times faster than the speed at which they were implementing prior to the COVID period. So that was very revealing. So that, one of the take homes probably could be from this conference. I'm sure there would be many, many speakers, different ideas will come forth. And I'm sure digitalization, adopting the digitalization could be one of the enablers to sustain or rather build sustainable resilience and also prepare ourselves for the future growth. And what do you do? What is digitalization? The main object, of course, as a part of the digitalization, you have access to, or rather, there are a big list of technologies and tools available. As part of that, you have artificial intelligence, virtual reality, machine learning, robotic technology, 3D printing, and artificial reality and virtual reality together, and GPS-based control, movement control, the access control, biometric-based, etc. So there are several technologies available, and the advantages of implementing or adopting any one of these or more of these technologies would, in fact, with an objective of simplification of your process and reducing the man-machine interface, and your ability to make the process efficient, remove the unproductive steps in your work process, and enhance safety, enhance asset integrity, enhance asset and people safety, I would say, and the fixation of accountability and transparency in your working and transactions. So these are some of these advantages, and I'm sure if you everybody would agree that these advantages would really help us and will be the enablers for the future growth, and also they would help you to build some resilience within your operations. So I just with this I will I set the stage for the people uh, to take up the topics. I'm sure they've listed they've got a uh, they've got an array of speakers with the varied topics, and I'm sure this conference will throw some light and the delegates will have something to take back home and apply them in their workplace. With that, I conclude my um, opening remark, or rather, opening remark of the conference, I would say, and leave the stage to Mr. Barua, our keynote speaker of today. And at the same time, I wish all the delegates the best of time in the next 3 days during the conference. Thank you.